Today's talk is titled, Do What You Can, by Peter Friedrichs, to be delivered by Donn Howell. We know Donn well as our friend and UUCC president. He will introduce the author of his message this morning. Donn?
All right. While searching for material for our services, Randy Schwalbe found a sermon in the treasure trove of published sermons that the UUA maintains on its website, and he showed it to me. That sermon, Be Who You Are, the third in a series by Reverend Peter Friedrichs, so spoke to me and had such relevance to my own life that I wanted to share it with you all, which I did this last January. Now, halfway through the year, I present to you the second of Friedrichs' 3 sermons, Do What You Can, an appropriate subject in view of these interesting, troublous times. But let's start with some background information. First, let me tell you a little about Peter Friedrichs. He is a UU pastor who retired in 2022 after serving 16 years as lead minister of the UU Church of Delaware County in Media, Pennsylvania. This sermon, Do What You Can, that I am presenting to you today, was written sometime in 2010 and published in 2015. After retirement, Friedrichs relocated to Keene, New Hampshire, where he lives with his wife of 42 years. Currently, he is a member of the board of the New Hampshire Alliance for End-of-Life Options. He is an ardent advocate for the rights of all people diagnosed with a terminal condition to make their own decisions about when to end their lives. Now, Do What You Can is the second of 3 sermons that Reverend Friedrichs delivered honoring Reverend Forrest Church. Reverend Church passed away in 2009, some 15 years ago this September. Enough time has passed that some of you may not be familiar with his work, so let me fill out the picture of Forrest Church with a very short biography. Forrest Church was born in Palo Alto, California in 1948, while his father, Frank Church, was a student at Stanford Law School. Following his father's graduation in 1950, the family returned to Boise, Idaho, and Frank Church was elected to the United States Senate in 1956 and served 4 terms until January of 1981. And may I say, he was one of my favorite senators. Frank's son, Forrest Church, was a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Divinity School. He received a PhD in early church history from Harvard University in 1978. He served for almost 3 decades as senior minister and was also minister of public theology at All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City. Between 1985 and his death in 2009, he wrote or edited 25 books. These include technical studies of Christian and Gnostic literature, as well as over a dozen books addressing a wider audience. The second reading this morning, which is one of my favorites, is Forrest Church's extended metaphor of the world as a cathedral with many varied windows. Now, during his sermon, Friedrichs refers us to the words and ideas of Gordon B. McKeeman, author of our first reading, A Drop in the Bucket. Reverend McKeeman was born in 1920 and passed away in 2013. He served as minister of several Universalist churches in New England, and in 1961 was called to a large, dynamic congregation in Akron, Ohio. And then, from 1983 until his retirement in 1988, he served as president of the Star King School for the Ministry. McKeeman said that he always hoped some other job than minister might leap off the want ad pages in the Sunday newspaper. But he never found anything else that he was qualified for. So now the sermon. And now Do What You Can, a sermon by Reverend Peter Friedrichs. Unless this caused a little confusion, remember this is the second in a series, and so Friedrichs, it refers to something that he said last week, and he means the last time he presented the previous sermon, so I just don't want to confuse you about that. So he's saying, today is the second of our three-part sermon series dedicated to Reverend Forest Church. As I noted last week, Church spent nearly 30 years as the senior minister of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in New York City. He was a public theologian who authored 20 books in his lifetime and was a frequent commentator in the public media. After being diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus, he sat down to write what he thought would be his last book, and the result was Love and Death, My Journey Through the Valley of the Shadow. Forest Church succumbed to his disease last September, shortly before publication of his final work entitled The Cathedral of the World, a Universalist Theology. 10 years earlier, Church acknowledged that he was addicted to alcohol and he joined AA. As part of his recovery, he developed a mantra that he said served him well for the remaining years of his life. It consists of 3 statements. Want what you have, do what you can, and be who you are. Last week, we examined the statement, want what you have. This week, I would like to offer you my reflections on do what you can. Do what you can. This part of Church's mantra, he tells us, focuses our mind on what is possible, no more, no less, thereby filling each moment with conscious, practicable endeavor. In this simple statement, Church is at once acknowledging that we have power and control over our destiny, while he is also acquiescing to the limitations and boundaries that we experience as human beings. He is orienting us towards the feasible and the achievable, knowing full well as individuals we are limited in our reach and our scope. In one of the closing chapters of Love and Death, Church bemoans how much wasted energy we spend trying to do what we can't, how often we fail to optimize our efforts and thereby achieve the significant goals that do lie within our power. He goes on to tell us, when we quit trying because we fail to achieve our pipe dreams, we overlook all we actually could accomplish by putting our shoulders squarely to the right wheel. When Church instructs us to do what you can, he is calling us to let go of dreams of grandiosity and to focus on the meaningful accomplishments we can achieve within the context of our everyday lives. This statement is reminiscent of the reading found in our hymnal written by Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale more than a century ago. He said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." While I was reflecting on the simple statement, do what you can, my mind went back to the spring of 1989. The once monolithic Soviet bloc had begun to disintegrate, and the Berlin Wall had begun to crumble. Students and other pro-democracy forces in China seized what they perceived to be an opportunity to pressure their government to loosen its iron grip on its people. And the protesters flooded the streets of the capital, Beijing. The Chinese government, as you may recall, acted swiftly and violently to crush the peaceful protests. And hundreds, perhaps thousands, were killed. If you're like me, there is one image from the Tiananmen Square protests that is burned indelibly into your mind. One of the few images that survives from that time and place. It is the image of Tank Man. We call him Tank Man because his identity has never been known, at least to the Western world. In the video that was smuggled out of the country, we see a column of Chinese tanks rumbling down a street in central Beijing, and we see a lone man carrying what appear to be shopping bags step off the sidewalk and into the path of the oncoming tanks. Instead of mowing him down as they easily could, the column comes to an abrupt halt in front of him. Tank man stands stock still in front of the lead tank, and the tank sits there idling. Then the lead tank tries to maneuver around the man. Each time it does, tank man moves sideways to block the tank's progress. Finally, the tank driver gives up, shuts down his engine. The two are at a standoff. This is the iconic image, a lone man standing up for human rights, staring down the barrel of the tank's gun, holding it at bay. Eventually, members of the secret police arrived and removed the tank man from the scene, and the tanks proceeded on their mission of death and destruction. But tank man left his mark. We know, of course, that tank man did not bring down the Communist Party apparatus. We know that the Chinese government suppressed the student protests with overwhelming force and violence. We also know that China remains one of the most oppressive countries on the face of the planet, severely limiting many of the freedoms that we here take for granted. And while we don't know for sure, we suspect that tank man paid for his actions with his life. I have no idea what triggered tank man to step off the curb and to stand his ground that day. But in one stark and startling moment, he did what he could. And for a few brief moments, it seems, one man had stopped the oppressive Chinese regime in its tracks. Last week, I mentioned the Marianne Williamson quote that has over the years been attributed to Nelson Mandela. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Now, this statement is highly inspirational, and I think it speaks the truth. But it is not entirely true. It is, in some ways, a statement more about the limits of our imagination and our self-perceptions than it is a statement about the extent of our power. The truth is that most of us are not like Tank Man. The truth is that the effort that most of us make is going to be of the drop in the bucket kind. But as you heard in today's reading, that drop might just really matter. Gordon McKeeman warns us against the unspoken assumptions that of the drop in the bucket mentality. Excuse me. We assume that a full bucket is what we're aiming for, and that until the bucket is full, nothing has been accomplished. And I love that question that hits us right between the eyes. Why is it that our image is of the first drop in the bucket? The implication is that our drop may be the last drop, the one more drop that actually fills the bucket. In his book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell talks about how little things can make a big difference. Using viruses as a model for explaining social change, he tells us that a small change in behavior can alter the course of society. He writes that we are, as humans, heavily socialized to make a kind of rough approximation between cause and effect. Viruses and epidemics, both medical and social, don't work that way. In fact, he goes on, oftentimes the effect of a seemingly small cause can be huge. To appreciate the power of epidemics, he writes, we have to abandon the expectation of proportionality. We need to prepare ourselves for the possibility that sometimes big changes follow from small events, and that sometimes these changes can happen very quickly. He encourages us to consider how we might start our own positive social epidemics. Now, this tipping point theory is dramatically demonstrated by the story of the 100th monkey. While not verified scientifically, the story is at least illuminating as a parable. Back in the 1950s, oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Couldn't figure a good way to do that. Okay, back in the 1950s, scientists were studying the behavior of a certain type of monkey on an isolated island in Japan. They noticed that most monkeys would eat the staple of their diet, sweet potatoes, fresh out of the ground. But then they observed that one monkey took a sweet potato down to the nearby shore and washed it in the water. Other monkeys on the island, watching this behavior, soon began to copy it. More and more monkeys began to wash their meals before eating them. And then something amazing happened. As we're told, once a critical mass of monkeys on this island was washing its sweet potatoes, the so-called 100th monkey, the same behavior began to occur in monkey populations on other nearby islands, unconnected to the first colony. When a tipping point was reached, there somehow was communicated to other monkey colonies the message, wash your sweet potatoes. And they did that without Facebook or email. The point of all this is to say that by doing what we can, we are doing one thing for certain and possibly another. First and for certain, we are having a local and immediate impact, whether it is making sure that the homeless family has a roof over its head and meals to eat when we volunteer for the Interfaith Hospitality Network, or it is writing a letter to our representative in Harrisburg to advocate for reasonable gun control measures. Those actions have immediate effects and consequences. Secondly, and perhaps less certainly, when we do what we can, we are adding our drop to a bucket that may be nearly full, that may be balanced on its edge and near the tipping point. We may be that 100th monkey whose action sparks the epidemic of social change. With all that being said, I ask you to notice that Church's phrase, do what you can, has a Buddhist ring to it. It does not concern itself with consequences, and it asks us to release ourselves from attachment to outcomes. Do what you can, a simple imperative to act within the scope of our ability. Don't worry about the impact. That will take care of itself. While Forrest was eminently practical in his approach to life, he accepted that life is ultimately a profound mystery and that the impact of our lives cannot be known. In their work, How Can I Help?, Ram Dass and Paul Gorman tell us that service is ultimately a journey into the unknown. If we obsess over the effect of our actions, whether we're the first monkey or the 100th, the last drop in the bucket or the first, we may, because of the apparent futility, choose simply never to act at all. Dass and Gorman tell us that we have a choice to make. We can either be frustrated and worn out by uncertainty and doubt, they write, or we can try to find a way to open to the ambiguity, embrace it, work with it, be moved and inspired by it, and thereby come closer to the very heart of service where true freedom is found. This letting go of outcomes is embedded in Forrest Church's simple statement, and it rings true to the statement of Jesus when, after telling the parable of the Good Samaritan, he instructed the lawyer to simply go and do likewise. Ram Dass says we give it all we have and trust the rest to God, to nature, to the universe. We do everything we can to relieve someone's suffering, but we are willing to surrender attachment to how we want things to be. On that bright blue day in June of 1989, in a stunning act of courage, the tank man did what he could. He stood. He simply stood. He stood in front of a column of tanks, preventing their passage, at least for a time. I doubt he thought he was going to bring the Chinese government to its knees. I doubt even that he thought the tanks were going to stop. But he did what he could do. He stood for freedom. He stood for justice. He stood for the oppressed people of his country. Let the image of this one courageous soul stand as an inspiration to the rest of us as we heed Forrest Church's call to do what you can. Go and do likewise. Amen and blessed be.